Hello and welcome to our low carb no sugar cooking channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of my favourite desserts. It's basically a birthday cake, a chocolate cake, because everyone wants one at their birthday. So what I've got here is a really large tin. It's going to be quite a large cake so it can go around. Here I've got 500 grams of beetroots and 80 grams of dates. And what I'm going to do is put a little bit of water in there. So I'm going to cook these on the hob for about 5 minutes. Now whilst that's happening, I'm going to put the eggs into here, into the Magimix, and give them a good fluff up. So basically it gives it a nice light fluffy cake. I find it helps. So I'm going to put them in here probably for about 5 minutes. It does seem like it's got quite a few eggs in it, but as I say, it's a very large chocolate cake, very dense, very rich. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 7 eggs straight onto the Magimix and turn it on. So whilst those eggs are just being done, in this bowl here I've got 275 grams of almond flour, and into that I'm going to put 100 grams of pure cacao powder. So we get 100 grams in there. Really easy to do. So we've got 100 grams of cacao powder, 275 grams of almond flour, and into there I'm just going to put a teaspoon of baking powder. The reason I put so many eggs in it is because obviously with the nut flours it's really hard to get a proper rise out of them. So I find that quite a few eggs and a bit of baking powder seems to work. So give that a good mix. Smells lovely, really chocolatey. So now you've basically got a nice chocolate flour there, really lovely. And then the fat, what we're going to use is we're going to use some cocoa butter. So I'm going to use 75 grams of cocoa butter. 75 grams of coconut oil. We put that in there. The cocoa butter gives it a really nice, rich, chocolatey taste. That goes in there. And then what we do is just quickly melt that in the microwave. It takes about a minute and a half. So whilst that's melting, and the beetroot we put on earlier on the hob is now being cooked. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that off. It's our mixture of dates and beetroots. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to strain the liquid off. There's only a tiny bit of liquid in it. I'm just going to strain that off and then blitz the beetroot in a NutriBullet. Hi, so what I've got here is I've got the beetroot and the dates all pulverised up in there. I drained off the liquid to get rid of that. You don't want any liquid in the cake, but that gives it a nice, deep, rich base. Then to that, I'm going to add the melted cocoa butter and coconut oil straight in there. Give it a little whisk around. Combine it together. Don't get too splashy. I use a nice big bowl, otherwise it can get a big splashy. As I said, it's a very big cake. So into that goes our cacao powder almond flour. Straight in. This is where it can get a bit claggy, because what we're going to do is just quickly stir this in. And then I've had those eggs which have been in the Magimix for about 5 minutes. Really nice and fluffy. So what you end up with a nice big, dark, rich chocolate batter. Then to make that into a nice fluffy cake, see the eggs there? That's what happens when you leave them in there for 5 minutes. Beautifully light and fluffy. And literally just pour a bit in, half of them in, give them a good whisk, slowly combine. Smells absolutely delicious. But I don't use any sweetener in this cake because I use the dates for some natural sweetness instead. Obviously, if you don't get on with dates and you don't want them in the cake and you just want to use your sweetener, you can do that. So what you've got here is you've got a beautiful rich cake batter. Lovely dark red rich from the beetroots and the cacao. Pour it into your lime tin. Put them in there. To give the tin a little bash, getting the air bubbles out, and then that goes into a preheated oven at 180 for about 30 minutes. Right, so after 40 minutes in the oven it took, not 30, so 40 minutes in the oven, what we're going to do is we're going to take a knife, run it around the outside of the tin. It's been in the tin for about 2 or 3 minutes, so it's just enough. It's still quite warm, but you're able to work with it. Then quickly release it. Just check that nothing's stuck. It's nothing worse than ripping the cake after all the hard work. Off it comes. And then what you need is a cooling rack, and you can literally give it a flip straight upside down like that. Down it goes onto your cooling rack, and then you can just carefully peel the bottom off, and off comes the grease proof. Hopefully it hasn't stuck. Try not to rip the cake. And there we have it. A beautiful chocolate cake. Lovely and rich. You can either slice it in the middle, fill it with jam and cream, whatever one you want. Or you can put a ganache on it, which I will do. It's all made, it's cooled down. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to make my ganache frosting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 300 grams of cream cheese, put it in a pan, quickly weigh out 300 grams. There we go. And into that I'm going to use 50 grams of cocoa butter. And I'm going to use 50 grams of actual butter. So 50 grams of real butter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly melt that over a really low heat just to bring it all together. And whilst that's melting on the hob, I'm going to quickly weigh out some of my sweetener. So whilst that's on the hob, we're going to quickly weigh out the sweetener. So I'm going to use 60 grams of sweetener for this one. And there I have it, so that's melted. All the cocoa butter's melted, the butter and the cream cheese all come together. Put that to one side whilst we quickly go back to measuring out this sweetener. So I've got 60 grams of sweetener in there, and I'm going to use 100 grams of chocolate powder. This is pure cacao powder. Give that a little mix together. Push that to one side. So what I'm going to do is quickly mix this into the cream cheese frosting and then basically pour it straight over the cake, and it should just pour all the way over it. So, sorry, it's a bit of a mess in there at the minute. So what we've got here, we've got our cream cheese, cocoa butter and butter, and we're just going to slowly pour that in, whisking all the time. That's it. And this is like a cream cheese frosting, just to add some sweetness to the cake. And we just pour it straight onto the top. It's nice and hot. A bit of spread around. Let it try and fall down the sides of the cake. So there you have it, the beetroot chocolate cake, the cream cheese chocolate frosting.